Good morning, friends, and thank you for joining us on our webinar here at churchgrowthinthebox.com. And today we have with us Ken Howard of Faith X. And in my networking, I came across Ken, and he's a very professional, thorough person who's done a lot of studying in the church growth area, and especially in communities and understanding your neighborhood. So we're very happy to have Ken with us today. Before we get started, just want to do a quick update. With Finish Line Planner, and at Finish Line Planner, we're developing a new project called churchgrowthinthebox.com. Churchgrowthinthebox.com is for pastors who are very busy and they want to maximize their efficiency and time in church growth projects. So we will provide them a subscription-based library of ready-to-deploy growth plans. These growth plans will have training videos with them and also digital tools for administration and promotion. So you get to view the training video, you like what you see, you can call your team together. There's an assignment button on the application. Say, hey guys, this is something for us to move forward with. And you can start having interaction with your team. They don't have to develop everything from scratch because of the tools. In a typical kit will have a dozen or more tools ready for you. Planning sheets, tracking sheets, forms and documents, media for social and slide presentations to promote the event, all ready to go. So we're getting ready to enter into the beta of Church Growth in a Box. Once it's in production, the subscription rate is monthly, $1.99 per person on your team, and that's for each person to have their own copy on their device. They will go live probably in September or October of 2018. But right now, we are looking for ministers that would be interested in joining us and their teams for beta to give us feedback so we can correct some of the misunderstandings we had about how your processes work and stuff. So you can sign up for this beta wait list at churchgrowthinabox.com. And so we appreciate you going over to that site and signing up and joining us and helping us to make a better product so that it will be a bigger blessing to you and your church. So we're going to introduce Ken Howard of Faith X. Ken, if you want to just give some background, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Ken Howard. I'm an Episcopal priest in the Diocese of Washington, D.C. I've been ordained now for about 25 years. Prior to ordination, I was working in the private sector doing organizational development work with mergers, acquisitions, downsizing, right-sizing, all that stuff. And God doesn't waste anything. So when I moved over into ordination and started working in the church, what I did was start working with church planting and church redevelopment. In other words, some of us call it church flipping, turning a struggling church around. And so for the last 25 years, I've been doing that. I've planted 2 congregations, one an Episcopal congregation, and before that, a Messianic Jewish synagogue. That's a little bit of my background. I actually grew up Jewish. So I left my previous congregation, which was the first successful church plant in the Diocese of Washington in 40 years. When they hit 20 years old, I decided it was time for the founder to leave, and I was feeling called to take what I'd learned and bring it to a larger community of church planters and church redevelopers, people who are trying to connect their congregations to their community and learn how to do it in an age of very fast change and high level of uncertainty. So that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half.
Thank you, Ken. Welcome, Cheryl and Philip. In the chat box, can you confirm that everything is working? You can hear us fine, that you can see everything fine. And then also in the chat box, tell us where you are from. We'd love to hear from you. And at any time in this presentation, you are welcome to put your question in the chat box, and we'll ask Ken the personal questions you may have. Now, Ken, your consultancy, you have an Episcopal background and some Jewish background, but you consult the whole breadth of Christianity. Is that correct?
Well, yep, that's correct. As I mentioned to you once when we were just getting to know each other, my way into the church actually came through the Foursquare Gospel Fellowship, so I've been all over the map in terms of where I've been in the church. And yes, but what I do, it's for the entire spectrum of Christian denominations.
All right. Hey, thanks, Tim, from Winnebago, Minnesota. A good friend of mine. Appreciate him and the work he's doing in his church in a small town.
Yep.
And what we do today will apply to that as well. So the challenge, Ken, let's start with the scripture tells us to love our neighbor, but how can we love our neighbor if we really don't know them?
Right. And that is actually a lot of what I've been trying to do for the last several years. When do you think it'd be appropriate for me to share slides, you think?
When you're ready.
Okay. Yep. So let me, I have some slides that I'd like to share about that. And let me do the slideshow and play from the start. So what we're trying to do is to figure out how to keep up in times of change, and part of the change that we're running into is that we kind of have lost track of our neighborhoods. We don't know how to love our neighborhoods the way we used to. Some of the change that is kind of driving us out of connection with our congregations is the fact that as a church, as the entire church, that we've kind of become better at dividing than we are at multiplying. Over the last 2,000 years, for the first 1,900 years, we were actually growing denominations at a very very steady rate. It took Christianity 1,900 years to develop 1,600 denominations, but in the last 120 years, we've basically gone from 1,600 denominations to, at the turn of the century, 34,000 denominations, and we're now at 45,000 denominations. And the same thing is happening with congregations themselves. That every time somebody gets a new idea, they go off on their own and start to organize around everybody being the same. And then we run into a problem when that has taken a real rise upward, and the level of growth of Christians, it's been pretty strong and continues to be strong. It's kind of a linear thing. We just keep growing and growing. And now the rate of institutional growth, the number of churches and the number of denominations has just gone sky high, which means that the number of Christians per denomination is actually, over the next 100 years, is going to really, really drop. And so that's one of the changes that we're going to have to deal with. By the way, this research is available at my website, FaithX. Part of the problem also is that we're dealing with really high rate of increase in the number of unaffiliated. Those are the people who say none of the above when you ask them how they associate with denominations. Right now, we've risen to the point where 24% of the congregation is, 24% of the population in the United States is unaffiliated. And if it keeps going the way it is, it'll get to 75% just in the next 20 years. The same kind of thing is occurring when you look at unaffiliated by generation. The younger we get, in generations, the more unaffiliated we become. So when you're looking at millennials and Gen Z, we're now looking at 29 to 38% of those generations being unaffiliated. And then you have things like neighborhoods turning over really, really super fast. Just taking, for example, Latino population growth. You know, it used to be that we could look at our neighborhoods and we could, you know, they would turn over, you know, over generations. Now they're turning over overnight in terms of the characteristics of the neighborhood, of the issues they're facing, and the people that are out there. So one of the ways I like to think about it is, you know, we used to have time to learn about our neighborhoods by osmosis. You know, we would just wait for them to come in and tell us what they're up to and what their needs are and who they are, and learn about them that way. But we can't do that anymore because change is happening too fast. So now we need to learn at the speed of change, and we need to learn to do it well. And so what we're trying to do is to help people be more missional. Now, everybody uses that term missional to mean different things, but here's what I call it, what I describe it, is that missional assumes that God's already at work in the community. You know, we're not taking God out in the community. God's already there doing work, and our job is to figure out what God's up to in our community and align ourselves with it. So what we're looking for is a holy symbiosis or collaboration between our congregation, our community, and God. That's what being missional means. And so if we're going to try and learn about our communities, we really have to learn their story, which means we have to learn about them in three ways. We need to learn about our neighborhoods in terms of people characteristics, in terms of community issues, and in terms of community resources. We call that strategic missional planning. And what it involves is several steps, 7 steps. First, asking, you know, what is our neighborhood? In other words, defining what our neighborhood is. What is the neighborhood around our churches? What are its boundaries? Who are our neighbors? What are their characteristics? What issues are our neighborhoods facing? What are our neighborhoods' resources? Because we often forget that there are other people out there in the same field, the same mission field, the same vineyard as us, that are doing God's work as well. And part of our job is to support what they're doing as well as what we're doing. And then we have to think to ourselves, well, what does that mean in terms of us? You know, how do we need to shift what our congregation is doing and being and how we're organizing ourselves? And then we ask ourselves, so what does it go? Where do we go from here? So let me just run you through that. The step 1, what is our neighborhood? And this is used. Go ahead.
Are you trying to show us slides?
Yes.
You're not. You need to go back and share.
Oh.
Sorry with that.
Oh, rats. Sorry, I'm new at this game. All right. Okay, let's do this again. Thank you for asking.
Uh-huh.
All right, go over there. Now, can you see my slides?
Sure can. We can see the.
What is our new? Let me just really quickly show you those first several slides.
There you go.
So here's what I was saying about how fast the institution is growing versus individuals. This right here at about the beginning of the century is where those 2 lines of growth crossed, and where at this point the number of Christians per institution, per denomination, per worship center, over the next 50, 75 years is really going to take a nosedive. This is where we're talking about the unaffiliated. This is the unaffiliated by generation. This is Latino population growth that I was talking about, it's grown more in the last 20 years than it did in the previous 50. And here's my slide about learning by osmosis. You know, we wait for the neighborhood to come and talk to us, but it's a pretty slow process. And that we have to start learning at the speed of change, and we have to do it well. So here we're talking about God and community, that God's already at work out there. Our job is to figure out become a symbiosis between God, congregation, and community. And we need to learn the story of our congregations by learning who they are, what they're like, what the issues are they facing as a community, and the resources that are already in the community and the people that are already at work there. And then I was just starting to talk about strategic missional planning, what's involved.
Mm-hmm.
But let me stop there and see if you have any questions before we move on into how to do it. That's kind of setting the groundwork for how it is, why it is that we're losing touch with our neighborhoods.
Sure. So Ken, we do have one question that came in, and it may not be at this point, you may want to answer a bit later, but it is addressing church members that refuse to adapt to the current generation. They want the church to stay the way that it was decades ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's actually part of the problem. One of the reasons that I did the research was to basically show people that if we don't adapt, we're dead. I mean, we're not at the center of things anymore. We're not at the center of the culture anymore. We're now outliers. The culture is changing faster than we are, and people aren't affiliating with the church anymore. And so, part of the time we're in this situation where we have good answers for the questions that people were asking 40 years ago, and people aren't asking the same questions now. It may be that they're seeking some of the same things. I mean, people are really wanting to seek things like, they want to know that God exists. They want to know that God loves them. They want to know that there are people out there who love God who will also love them. As I kind of boil it down, we're really all we are really in is in the business of introductions. If we believe that Jesus' love is powerful and transformative, then really all we're needing to do is to try and connect people to Jesus. It's like Fred, Jesus, Fred, talk amongst yourselves, and let God take care of the rest. The problem is that we often basically think of what we're doing in terms of what we've been doing, and the what that we've done, our traditions, are the ways that we've tried to meet the why that's deep down inside us, but we never get to that why. And so if we say to ourselves, well, this is the way of organizing, the way of being, the way of speaking that about God that we've always done, it may speak to us because we're insiders and we know the language. But if we don't translate it to a new generation and connect it to the kinds of questions that they're asking, then we just won't survive. And it's going to be hard enough to survive as it is, because of the way that the church is fracturing today. And in terms of our neighborhoods, since our neighborhoods are changing overnight these days, we can't afford to shift generationally anymore. And so ultimately it's an issue of adapt or die. And as I've said to some congregations, it's really your choice. If your position is, I'd rather our congregation die than change, well, God will accommodate that. You have free will. But if you want to survive, and not only survive but thrive, then you've got to back up from, you know, what it is that makes you feel comfortable to what it is, to why it is you're there, and how God is asking you to be and do in different ways that will attract a whole new generation.
Right. So that's kind of the problem, the challenge, right?
Yep.
So do you have strategic steps? Because obviously it's not a switch that you throw and you do overnight. Is there strategic steps to start the transition without rushing it?
Well, yeah. I mean, basically, I think that most people are basically afraid of their neighborhoods. I think there are two things that keep people from going out into their neighborhoods to get to know them, and that's really the only way that we accomplish this, is by actually getting out into our neighborhoods. One reason we don't go out is that we're kind of afraid of our neighborhoods. We are afraid of making fools of ourselves by going out there and expecting to be able to talk in certain ways and bring certain ideas to people that maybe people aren't ready for, or we think that we're going to be going out there and meeting, you know, one kind of ethnic group and maybe meeting another instead. And so without knowing something about our neighborhoods, we won't go out. But also, if we think we know our neighborhoods, if we really think that we know them too well, we also won't go out. So the question is, you know, we need to be able to really focus on, number one, focus on why we're here. And then if we know really clearly what our real transcendent why of whys is for being in our neighborhoods, you know, to why God's put us here as a congregation, if we know that, then we can start experimenting with different ways of doing things. And we can try things and they can fail, and we can learn from those failures, and we can try again, because when things are changing as fast as they are now, we can't be assured of success the first time around. So we have to. Our big challenge is, you know, how do we stay true to what God's calling us to be, while trying new and different ways of being that. And so what I'm leading into now is this whole idea of missional planning, and how it is that you learn about your neighborhood and how do you translate that into action. So should I go ahead with that, you think?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. So the last several years, I've been working on developing a tool that's just about to launch this summer, called Mapdash for Faith Communities. And the group that's developing it with me is called Data Story. And the idea is that, you know, people in congregations and people anywhere don't really respond to facts and data so much as they do story. You have to make sense of the data that you're seeing before you can really act on it, before you can really absorb it. And so what we're doing is trying to make it easy for you to learn the story of your neighborhood, to actually build it up from scratch, you know, based on what you're learning. So here's how this particular tool works. You know, the first thing is we locate your congregation on a map. This is a church, by the way, in the Episcopal Diocese of the Central Gulf Coast in Mobile. It's called Trinity Episcopal Church. And then the first thing we do is we define the neighborhood in terms of what we call a mission web. And a mission web is basically your area of strongest influence and attraction. Research says that about 70 to 80% of the general population, if they're looking for a congregation, they will try the one closest to them before they'll try one farther away. In other words, people are lazy, but that's human nature. And so this is your area of kind of least competition, your area of greatest influence and attraction. That's one way of looking at your area. This is kind of like your low-hanging fruit. But then you have to look at where your congregation is going to come from overall. What we do with that is we put up a 15-mile drive time on the map. And that's, the distance. If somebody was to drive in any direction from Trinity here, that they would actually, this is how far they would get in 15 minutes.
Wow. So Ken, that's not a circle. Your system actually is looking at the accessibility of highways and such.
That's right. Just like with the previous map, it's a similar thing. It's like these are defined the same way. It's like if you were to drive this way from this church and this way from this church, this is where you'd meet.
Okay.
So equidistant drive times. And they may be 15 minutes, they may be 5 minutes. Your area of greatest influence and attraction gets smaller the more churches of the same denomination that exist around you. Because unfortunately, our own denominational congregations are generally our biggest competitors, unless we make them our biggest collaborators. Okay. So anyway, so this is the 15-minute drive time. Why 15 minutes? Well, Baylor University has studied this issue for decades, and what they have found is that 70% of your congregation, of your members, will come from within 15 minutes. So this is kind of the realistic boundaries of where your people will come from. And oddly enough, that 15-minute drive time, willingness to drive no more than 15 minutes holds true whether you're in the city, whether you're in the suburbs, or whether you're in the country. So 70% of your members will come from there. What you'd also need to look at is what other same denomination congregations are in your area. As I said, they'll be your biggest competitors unless you make them the biggest collaborators. Then what you need to do is you need to look at where you're in competition with each of the surrounding same denomination congregations. You can see how this 15-minute drive time from St. Luke's is about 50% overlapped with Trinity Episcopal Church. So that means if you're 0 to 50% overlapped, you need to start acting like you share a community together, because you do. And so you really need to not just be thinking about yourself as a congregation, but looking at the other same denomination congregations and similar congregations that are trying to do the same work you do. Because if you don't collaborate, you're doing what the people in marketing call cannibalizing. And people don't like to be cannibalized. They want to be loved. So if you have congregations that are even closer, like St. Paul's and Trinity, you need to start getting into formal collaboration with them. If they're so close to you that you're like 75% and up, you need to consider acting as though you were one congregation, whether that means merging or whether that means getting into a team ministry with them. You need to really work very closely together. But then after you've defined the area that you're going to study, what is your neighborhood and who you share it with, you need to start looking at who your neighbors are, and you review their demographic and lifestyle data. We use a group called Esri. There are other groups that collect data of this sort, but this is based on marketing segmentation data. So what we do is we have developed what's called a missional context lifestyle report for every group, every lifestyle segment that lies within your community. There are 67 different, Esri has 67 different lifestyle segments. These are groups of people that are like each other and have similar issues, similar needs, similar characteristics. And so you begin to look at all these, and then you choose them one by one, and you click on this view report, and this takes you to a missional context report. And this basically looks at 10 issues: communications and technology. How do you reach them? What do they watch? What do they read? How you organize for education and formation, what the neighborhood issues, what kinds of children are there by age range? What kind of fellowship are they looking for? What kind of leadership skills do they tend to bring? Stewardship and finance issues, their income and net worth, and their capacity and tendency to give, theological and political orientation. I wish we couldn't tell you this, but unfortunately, our politics and our theology have gotten so overlapped that it actually is fairly easy to tell based on a person's political orientation what their theological orientation is going to be. So, not saying any one of those is better than the other, but you should know before you start talking with them. Then you start actually digging down into the actual characteristics of your neighborhood. You review population growth. You look for areas that are growing, because those are areas where you're going to have an opportunity to do missional work. Because growing means new people coming into the neighborhood, people who haven't attached themselves to a community yet. Areas of lesser growth that are just plateaued, not so much. Then you want to look at diversity in the neighborhood, because even if a particular area of your mission web isn't growing, if it's becoming more diverse, that's still an opportunity. Because that still means, even though the total population of your area, of your neighborhoods aren't growing, they're becoming, if they're becoming more diverse, then that means that new and different people are coming into the neighborhood, and new and different people mean more opportunity. You look at generational predominance. How many boomers are in your neighborhood? How many Gen Xers, how many millennials, how many Gen Z, etc. And what you're actually looking for is a good balance, because if all you have in your neighborhood is boomers, you've got people who will support the church presently, but there's nobody who can support the church in the future. But if you have all if you have all millennials and Gen Z, you have a future there, but you have no present. So you're really looking at trying to reach out to both people who are in the current generation, and people who are in the coming generations. You also you can look at things like educational predominance, median income, racial predominance, specific age ranges, and all of these can help form a picture of your neighborhoods. And I use the term neighborhoods because people often think that they just have a neighborhood that they're situated in, but actually you have lots of different neighborhoods that you have to reach out to, each of which has its own story, its own characteristics, its own issues.
So Ken?
Yeah.
Okay, can we just go back for a minute and do a review? Okay, I'm picking up an echo. You might have to mute one of your browser tabs. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But if you can go back to the map that shows the 15-minute drive for a minute.
Sure. There you go.
And the name of this tool is the Data Story tool?
Yep, Data Story for Faith Communities.
Okay. Yeah, so we had one person to drop out, come back in, so let's catch him back up real quick. So this is a map of 15 minutes from, this one is the Trinity Episcopal Church.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me just back up to the beginning one. This is Trinity Episcopal Church right here.
All right.
Any direction you drive along any street, this marks how far you would get in 15 minutes.
Right. So this map is aware of the thoroughways, the traffic, and stoplights, and all those type of things for figuring out that 15 minutes. That's why it's not a circle.
That's right.
This is very short. We could get that arm sticking out on the right-hand side there.
Yeah, because there's an expressway that runs over there. So that means you could get almost to this church, this city over here in 15 minutes.
Right. So if you move forward, then just kind of quickly, there's some analysis here on similar churches in your denomination and overlapping.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of get an idea of where you need to collaborate with your neighboring churches. where there's opportunities to serve that same zone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
And it often turns out that when you begin to actually dig into this area and you find out the different kinds of people in this area, it could be that the people from St. John's, St. Paul's, have a different, have a different kind of population characteristics from each other. They might have, different things that they're good at, that they feel called to do. And so this allows you to begin to think, well, which areas of this area that we share together is St. Paul's best able to serve, or Trinity is able to serve, or St. Luke's.
Right. So one might be more educated, or one might be Spanish.
Right. Yeah.
Things like that.
And a Spanish congregation is better reaching out to Hispanic speaking people than than an Anglo congregation.
Okay.
It is.
And so then you get into this map and you start understanding the demographics.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So as you see the Trinity area there, kind of outlined in black, you can go back just one real quick.
Mm-hmm.
All the different colors, those are neighborhoods that had different definitions.
Right.
Right.
And each of these represents a different lifestyle segment.
Right. And that's where, when you're close to a neighboring church, you could divide that lifestyle segment up, right?
Right.
And know who you're reaching to serve the best.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And this is the report with the details of the lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. We have one of these for each of the 67 lifestyle segments.
Right. Okay. Now we're starting to look at population growth and diversity, and where that is in our 15-minute drive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Again, the 15-minute drive time would be like this, and then your area of greatest influence is within this little black line here, your mission web.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to click on each of these, and darker means more diverse, lighter means less diverse, but you can click on each of these and it'll actually tell you
right
what it's made up of, because this is what the diversity index basically is a statistical tool which tells you, if you were to pick two people at random from within that mission web area, if you were from that community, what is the likelihood that they would be a different race, ethnicity, or language? So the higher that number, the more diverse it is.
Right. And so three things that are very powerful I see here. One is that 15-minute drive is 70% of your congregation
will come from there. Mm-hmm.
Right. Least competition. So when you put an effort into that area, you're more likely to bear fruit than you are if you go outside of that area. Number one.
That's correct. Right. And these are where people are. The greatest number of visitors to your congregation are going to come from within these boundaries right here.
Right. So number two, you identify those growing areas. So now, not as at least competition, but it's also these people are looking because they just moved into the area, they're bought a new home, and they are looking for a church.
That's right.
So
and diversity tells you the same thing. If it's increasing,
correct,
that means people are moving in.
So the population's not growing, but the population's changing.
Right.
Right.
Either way, it's an opportunity.
Correct. So now we moved the barrier of competition. We moved the barrier of guessing, who's looking for a church. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then with the neighborhood data, the lifestyle data, we know how to talk to them so we don't waste our time talking with them, being very generic. We can be very specific, addressing their needs, which removes another barrier.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So I compare this to the pastor who just gets a harebrained idea. He saw another church do something. We need to do that.
Right.
Maybe. Maybe not. You may be hitting all these barriers, right?
Yeah, because if you don't know what your community really is, then you're just guessing. Mm-hmm. And you're liable to guess based on what's worked for you in the past. You're liable to guess based on what the pastor and the church next door is doing. But neither of those really are the answer. You really need to know who your neighbors are so that you can bring Christ's love to them in a way that they'll understand.
Sure. Wow. Man, I am eating this up. I hope everybody else is too. Okay, so we go back to the question that the gentleman had about his church not addressing the current generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it kind of sounds like, I think this is the way we go. This is how we grow a church versus you. And we kind of, batter back and forth. But if I have this data, right?
Right.
I can take this data to the church and say, okay, here is the people we can serve. How can we serve our neighbors?
That's correct.
We said we loved them, but we weren't concerned about what their needs were.
Right.
Now we know what their needs are. We know how to love them.
That's right.
So you're not saying we need to change our church from old generation to new generation. You're saying here's our opportunity. Now the fruit of that will be a transitional change of the church.
That's right.
Without having to throw a switch.
Yeah, I mean, you actually need to think of what the goal is here. I mean, your goal is not to change the nature, the makeup of your church. That's a byproduct. Your goal is to learn the people in your neighborhood and love the people in your neighborhood. And you love them by finding out what their needs are, what their issues are, and then trying to help them with them.
Right.
And so if you look at this one, for example, if I was dealing with Trinity and talking to them about this, and if they had a bunch of boomers in the congregation and said, well, we like it exactly the way it is, and you look over here and you say, well, the green is boomers. There's no boomers in this area, really. Mm-hmm. It's becoming really, really quickly Gen X and millennial. So we need to start asking them what their needs are and how it is, what kind of a church that they want, and what kind of a worship experience they want, what kind of fellowship do they want, why do they want to come to church? And you find out, for example, with millennials, they want to. There's two things that really define millennials. One is that they really don't like bullshit. They really want to be who they are. They want you to be who you are and to be honest about it. That's one thing. They don't want to come to church and put on a mask. And on the other side is they want to change the world. And so if you're just all about being inside your church and having a nice worship experience at a coffee hour, they're not going to be interested in that. If you want to bring millennials into your congregation, you've got to go out and start changing the world with them, and getting yourself involved in making the neighborhood a better place. Then they'll join you.
Right. Now, most churches have limited resources, right?
Yep.
And so instead of trying to appease everybody, I can now have a filter that says the youth department comes up and says, oh, we want to do this great program. Well, how does that fit millennials or whatever it is that's in our neighborhood?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so it's not free willing to do anything. Take that $1,000 and let's focus it this way. If you come up with a program that focuses this way, then we'll spin it, and we know that we are going to gain traction and get benefit.
That's right. Your goal can't be to help everybody immeasurably. You really have to find out, what it is that God's calling you to do now, and to do that. And this helps, and this is kind of the first step, is finding out, who they are, what it is they're like as people. But then the next step is actually looking at what issues there are out there. And so another thing that we've included in this, I'll just show a few of these, is, you look at what issues they're dealing with. One of them might be poverty. So the green areas are low poverty. The more red you get, the higher poverty. So, in Trinity, for example, if they were looking at what one of the needs are, poverty is definitely going to be an issue. They're going to have to be dealing with things like feeding programs, like maybe affordable housing, or maybe homeless issues, everything that goes along with poverty. You could look at unemployment rate, which would tell you something else about your neighborhoods and what their issues might be. And again, you look here and you say, well, this darker area means really high unemployment. So you might want to work at helping people get new jobs. Might do skills training, or might do interviewing training, or something of that nature.
Right. Also, the time savings here. If I was starting a church plant and 3 years later found out I've got a bunch of guys who need job training,
right?
Versus if I'm planting a church and I can know right away they need job training.
Yeah,
I get ahead traction.
Well, people often ask us, "Well, couldn't I do this myself? Couldn't I go get the census data and the marketing data and pour over it myself?" Sure, you could.
Not this quick, though.
That's not that quick. That'll take you a long, long time. And you'll have to educate yourself first. We're just basically taking all of that part that's basically the hard, quote unquote, manual labor of looking at the statistics, and we're doing it and helping you interpret it in a very, very fast, experiential, real-time kind of way.
Right. Yeah. So, Ken, just a little break here. I put up the offer for the Congregational Vitality Assessment. It's a free download. Do you want to tell them what that's about?
Yeah, the Congregational Vitality Assessment is an Excel-based tool, Excel spreadsheet-based tool, which basically has 65 questions that have to do with the health of your congregation. And it looks at things like leadership, like giving, stewardship practices, your openness to change, your openness to outreach in your community, a whole about 10 different things, 10 different areas of church health. It gives you answer those by doing what they call a Likert scale response. You say strongly agree to strongly disagree, and it tells you overall what the vitality of your congregation is overall. But more importantly, in each of 10 different areas of church life, it tells you how healthy you are in each of those areas. So it's really a really helpful tool in terms of saying, how can we get more healthy in order to be of use to our neighborhood? Because you can't help make your neighborhood healthy if your own congregation isn't healthy.
Okay, so we'll leave that up for a little bit. We have another free offer for you too, just in a few minutes, if you want to continue, Ken, talking about the map.
Okay, so another thing you might look at is crime rate, and again, this would show you that that's certainly an issue in Trinity. In some of these other outliers areas, it might not be so much. But again, the idea is, you're not trying to learn the whole area, you're trying to learn your neighborhoods. So there are other things that you might look at. You might look at racial predominance. You might look at adults who exercise regularly, which is another one of the overlays, data map overlays that we have. This is actually built based on input from church planters and church redevelopers. So we actually pilot tested this in five dioceses of the Episcopal Church around the country, and basically said, is this map useful? Is that map useful? What maps do you need? And one of the things that people wanted was something that actually focused them on health of individuals. And exercise happens to be something that's really closely associated with health. And it can translate really quickly into, if you have an area that doesn't have access to exercise, number one of the things that you can do to reach out to them is maybe offer exercise programs in the church. But also it means that you're going to have to set up for dealing with other health issues, like, you might want to do, you might want to bring a community health person in to do physical exams or some other kind of health related service.
A dietary class,
immunizations, all of that.
Wow.
But again, I don't want to say that that what we're showing you here is the gospel. It's just what the statistics tell you, and you still from that, you have to think of, you have questions that you need to start asking about your neighborhood, and you need to go out and validate your hypotheses about what this is telling you.
Sure.
So then the next thing is you look at, and which we often forget to, is to look at neighborhood resources, people who are already out there doing the same stuff as we're doing that we can ally with. I call this being extrapreneurial. We often think that what we need to do in terms of turning our congregation around and helping it being more successful and growing more is that we have to be creative and experimental within our own congregations and do whatever we can to help them grow. But actually, if we ally with other people in the neighborhood and we really focus on helping them succeed as well, as we help them succeed, we succeed. And as we more closely ally with them, they help us more. Mm-hmm. And so this then allows you to begin to look at the resources, schools, for example, colleges and universities, for example, hospitals and healthcare facilities.
Wow.
And so you might find, like in this area over here with this congregation, that you basically have a healthcare desert. There's no hospitals at all over there. And so that might point out to you something that you need to do. There's other areas over here where there's not a single college or university, so that might create opportunities for you for doing educational activities within your congregation.
Right. So there's two opportunities here, right, Ken? One is I'm a church plant. I have limited financial and I have limited human resources.
That's right.
But if I partner with some of these guys, they're going to carry some of the financial burden and they're going to bring in some talent that will end up blessing my church, but I'm also blessing them because I'm bringing in people that they are looking to help.
Absolutely.
Then the inverse is, if it's a void and I do have the financial resources, this is an opportunity for me to connect and build relationships with people that those relationships eventually will build into members of my congregation.
Exactly. It's one of those things where the sum is greater than the individual pieces.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And either way, if you're a bigger church or a smaller church, there's opportunities.
Yes, either way, and especially if you're a small or church plant or struggling congregation, mm-hmm. You may not be able to reach out to these people on your own, but if you have 3 other churches and 1 hospital and 2 schools working with you, you may do 2 things. One is that you may actually be able to do more together to help your neighborhoods than you could separately. But also, as you start interacting with the neighborhood, then you begin to draw more people in who come into relationship with you and may want to be a part of your congregation.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Well, Rex, let's take a small break here and switch the offers because I'm able to do one at a time. We'll bring up the second offer here. And this is the book, Paradoxy, Creating Christian Community Beyond Us and Them. You explain what that is?
Yeah, that is a book that I wrote in 2005. It was a result of my experience dealing with issues of controversy within the church. And the way we tend to organize our communities often is around uniformity. And we think to ourselves, the more similar people are to us in the way that they think, in the specifics of what they believe, in the way they act, etc., the more like we are, the faster we are to grow. And actually, that's true. Churches that are based on uniformity actually grow faster than those that aren't, but they also get into trouble and conflict more often. And if you are expecting people to, say, for example, believe exactly the same way on every issue, all it takes is one group of people thinking that they believe differently on that one issue to split apart your congregation. Mm-hmm. And so so Paradoxy basically talks about a different way of organizing community. It's basically saying that if we realize that the ground of all Christian community is Christ's love for us, not our love for Christ. I mean, we hopefully we love Christ, but our love isn't constant enough or strong enough to hold the community together. If Christ's love is what holds us together, that really leaves a lot of room, for us to be different and yet be together.
Mm-hmm.
And we can leave it up to God to kind of set us straight on the issues that we might think are important, but others might not. And
Mm-hmm.
so what this allows is for people to come together with all of their differences and actually even learn from their differences, and expand their understanding of God by actually coming in contact with other people who think differently. Because if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that whatever you think you know about God, at least part of it's wrong.
Okay, so I've not read the book, but the PDF version of this is free, or real? I forget what the rate was.
Yeah, it's free. The PDF version is free. If you really want to have a paperback version, I'll send that to you for the cost of shipping only. And there's also an Amazon Kindle version of it that's actually like $3.49. They make you charge something for it, but I tried to make it as low as possible.
Okay, all right. Now we're broadcasting to across a number of denominations, and I'll probably get some hate email. But so I want to explain it this way: between unity and uniformity, right? There are some distinctives and some non-negotiables.
Yep.
Okay, and we're not talking about compromising. Okay, but there are other things. I prefer a white shirt and tie and suit coat when you're preaching the pulpit. When there's other people that will preach with the color shirt or an open collar. Okay, these are not life and death issues, right? So we got to be careful in our uniformity. How tight that is on things that really are not the do or die items, right? And work towards a unity on that. Now, if you believe in blowing up churches as God's message to you, I'm going to have issue with you. Okay?
Yeah, of course.
You're not going to. I'm going to have a uniformity issue with you there. So it's just using wisdom where that line is, and sometimes when we get under pressure and excited, we may take that line a little too far on the uniformity side of things. All right.
Yep.
So the data story tool. We've probably got a few more items to go over on that. We're running out of time. It's an amazing tool. It's loaded, and I can see all the barriers that it will remove. So I'm sure a lot of people have a question about this has got to cost something.
Yep.
So I got two questions about that. So first of all, what are we looking at?
In terms of cost?
Right.
So it depends on it depends on whether you're trying to get it individually or whether you're trying to get it through a denomination. We mostly work through denominations because that way we can sell a denominational dashboard and 4 congregational dashboards that they can share with other people in their in their diocese or synod or district or whatever they call it in your particular denomination. That usually for a diocese or whatever your particular way of grouping congregations is, for them to do that, it's a subscription fee of $7,500 a year.
Okay.
And for congregations can do it themselves. There's not as much there's not as much room for us to do economies of scale, so it costs $2,500 a congregation.
Okay. Yeah. So if they can get their local district or section or whatever it is of their church to cooperate together and everybody pitch in, it's going to be a lot
more cost effective.
Affordable
overall.
But also that cooperative part, right?
Yep.
Or the one church that's nearby says, oh, mine's this area and yours is that area. I see the difference. You serve
Right.
those type of people and I serve these type of people.
And that's the other reason we try and use a cooperative model of pushing this out into the world, is because that's the important thing in all this is collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
The more that we can collaborate with each other in the work of God, the better off we all are. Mm-hmm. And so if we go in through a diocese or district or whatever, that means that not only can other people use the same tool that we're using, but it also makes sure that the diocese or district or whatever is actually working alongside the congregations to ensure that not only that they have the tool, but that they're using the tool together.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I got a ton of education today. Appreciate your time, Ken. So your website, what's the URL?
It's pretty easy to remember. It's faithx.net, faithx.net. And my email, if people want to reach me, is Ken, Ken, at faithx.net.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ken, for your time. And for those watching this video, wow, there's a lot to digest here. And again, as Ken mentioned, we're looking at a, the district or section level of your church. Looking into something like this could be significant and could be real helpful. And it will save you, I think, at least 3 years and move tons of barriers, open all kinds of doors for you understanding your neighbors. And instead of saying you love your neighbors, well, you're putting a foot forward, you're initiating the relationships and loving your neighbors. That's awesome. If you get a chance, go to churchgrowthinthebox.com, and we just threw a bunch of stuff at you, but churchgrowthinthebox.com, sign up for our beta wait list, and we're going to pour a lot of resources into that for you. So we're glad for you to be a part of that. And again, thank you. And
you're welcome.
Everybody have a great day, and I look forward to exciting things happening in your church in the near future.
Go in peace, everyone.